Before I came into this teaching, I would have never considered myself a sanctuary for anything. But I know now I can walk into a place where there's discord happening, where there's some kind of, confrontation, anger, or whatever, and I can center myself and be a place of peace that emanates out from me that can dissipate the situation. Right. To me, 15, 20 years ago, that would have been an unconventional truth. That wouldn't have even been true. I wouldn't have even got to the truth part of it. That just would have been unheard of. To think that I could be a place that could bring peace to something else, to someone else, to a situation. But it's something that we do all the time. So what are unconventional truths? So I couldn't find an actual definition, so I had to create my own here. But it's ideas that challenge mainstream thinking, that challenge us to think in a new way, to come up with a new idea about something, and see how that can change our world. I happen to think that science of mind and new thought, our new thought philosophy, are absolutely filled with unconventional truths. In what Science of Mind teaches, Ernest Holmes writes this: Science of Mind reads every spiritual text and gleans the truth combined within. It studies all people's thoughts and draws from each that which is true. It's kind of like we take everything, and we synthesize it, and we find what Ernest called those golden threads of truth that run through all spiritual texts, all spiritual teachings. We take that, we synthesize it all together, and we come up with a new truth. Now, when I tell my fundamental Christian family about some of my unconventional truths, they look at me like I'm nuts, I can just start with, I call God it and not him. We can just start with that and go from there forever. But it was radical to begin to learn these truths for myself. I remember the first one that I really hit me hard was that simple statement: change your thinking, change your life. Do you mean what I think has an effect in my life? I didn't realize that. And now I had 2 degrees at that time, 2 college degrees, and I always thought I was pretty well educated, but I had never, ever put together the association of what I was thinking was showing up in my experience. It was all about the outward things. Those were the things that were causing my experience. Had nothing to do with what was internal for me. But Science of Mind taught me differently. New Thought philosophy has taught me differently. The New Thought philosophy began in the early 1800s with a healer called Phineas Quimby. Now, Phineas Quimby studied what was then called mesmerism from Mesmer, who was a French hypnotist. And they would go around, he would go around the country, around the area he was in anyway, and heal people through his mesmerism. Well, Quimby took that for a while. He worked with him for a couple of years and realized there was something more going on there. And so he started exploring it deeper. Phineas Quimby influenced lots of different New Thought people. One of them who's not necessarily considered New Thought, but Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science and all about mental healing. She actually worked with Phineas Quimby to develop her techniques that she used and wrote in her book, Science and Health. Along the same time, well, actually a little bit before that, was the Transcendentalist. Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalist, Henry David Thoreau, Alcott, Whitman, quite a few people in that New England area that formed together this idea of taking these thoughts from different faith traditions and bringing them together. Emerson was trained as a Unitarian minister. He quickly left that. He only spent a couple of years as a minister, and he quickly left it when his wife died suddenly. He studied Plato, and so he took the Greek philosophers, and he brought in their ideas. And after he had worked with Plato and the Greek philosophers for a while, he turned to the Hindu works, the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and actually began to look at those and could see how what the Greek philosophers were saying was in alignment with what the Hindu gurus and mystics were saying. And he brought it into his own work and his own transcendentalist work that he did. In one of his essays he gave at Harvard Divinity School, it was known as The American Scholar, was this essay. And it is actually supposed to be, or it's considered to be one of the, what they called at the time an intellectual declaration of independence. This essay that he read at Harvard. And he says in here, the soul is the perceiver and the revealer of truth. We know truth when we see it, whether it's unconventional or whether it's accepted by the mainstream. When we see truth, we know it. We feel it in our bodies. There is a knowing that can never be unknown in us when truth speaks to us so powerfully. I think much of the things that I've learned in Science of Mind are those kind of truths. Those kind of truths that actually have become embodied. Like I don't even have to think about them or analyze them or really spend much time with them. They are part of my everyday living. And I think that's what's available to us in there. So when we are faced with these unconventional truths, sometimes we, again, like have strong reactions from the people around us. It can make the situation kind of uncomfortable. It can make people around us uncomfortable. It can make us get defensive about our belief system. But it requires us here to step outside of our comfort zone. Unconventional truths do not happen in the comfort zone. Unconventional truths make people get worked up. If you think about it, a lot of the things that we hear or read on social media and the news and so forth nowadays, we have to take them in and decide whether that's a truth, a lie, or maybe it's one of those unconventional truths that's challenging our thinking up until that point. But it often makes us uncomfortable. We get disturbed in that. But again, transformation can only happen when we are disturbed a bit, when we're shaking up that status quo, when we are grappling with ideas that we haven't thought of before, or ideas that are new to the group of people around us, ideas that disturb us and make us feel interested, feel something inside of us. But they give us a chance to have a new perspective. They give us a chance to change what we're doing in favor of our personal evolution. They give us an opportunity to really uplift ourselves in consciousness. You know, as Sir Ernest says, we're on that ever upward spiraling evolution of consciousness. And unconventional truths can catapult us. They can kick us up to the next level very quickly in there. Emerson goes on to say in that same essay, he says, a mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions. How many of you that came from a different faith tradition could go back to it today? Yeah. For the most part, we can't. We can't go back to being the way that we were before. It just doesn't even feel right. Even if I don't want to practice this anymore, I can't regress and go back to what I believed before. It just doesn't work for me. I have seen some people that are able to do that, and they did it because what was happening was so disturbing they couldn't stand it. The change, the transformation that was going on in their lives in that moment was just so uncomfortable for them, they had to slip back into what was comfortable for them. So these unconventional truths that we have that form the basis of science of mind, that form the basis of new thought, our religion that we study here, they are things that shift the world, that change the world. As we grow in our understanding of these truths, then the world shifts around us. First, by shifting our own individual world, and then as the same thing I said with the sanctuary, when I become a place of knowing that truth, it radiates out from within me. As each one of us become a place that knows these fundamental truths, we change the world around us. Often in small, subtle ways, and sometimes in ways that shift us on an evolutionary leap. In physics, in quantum physics, they call that the quantum leap, or a discontinuous event. In other words, we had this one thing, we were at this one place, and all of a sudden, boom, we're over here. Unconventional truths catapult us forward in that quantum leap of understanding. In one of Ernest's books, Love and Law, he wrote this: one of the great truths of metaphysics is God can only become to the individual what God can become through the individual. So we have to begin to internalize those individual truths for ourselves before they can outpicture in our experience, because it has to come through us. Spirit always moves through us. That's the only way it works in the world, is through each of its creation. And so as we begin to understand it, we open up that space that allows Spirit to pour forth. And that changes the world around us. Science of mind, our philosophy that we practice here, is a way of understanding our connection with Spirit more than we can do in any other way that I've found. It's a way that we can open ourselves up to these truths that may have been niggling at the back of our mind, may have been there on the outskirts, but once we begin to take a little bit of time with it, spend time in meditation, spend time in contemplation, use our spiritual mind treatment as prayer to move us to a greater understanding. This is from the Science of Mind text. Ernest says, the science of mind leads us into new and better realization of our unity with the cosmos, pointing us to spiritual truths which we must practice for ourselves. We will never understand truth until we put it into action, until we actually take it in and experiment with it and see what we can change in our world because of that. These unconventional truths invite us to look beyond the surface level. They invite us to look into a reality that we might not have considered before, to question that status quo, to tear down those facades that seem to be the way we thought the world was. These unconventional truths have been the catalyst for change throughout history. Even before we wrote history, unconventional truths were practiced. As I was writing this talk on Wednesday, I had this visual come to me of prehistoric humans in a cave, freezing. It's ice age, they're cold, they're wrapped in what furs they can find, they're shivering in corners of this cave trying to stay warm. And here comes this one cave woman with a bison shoulder blade, loaded with coals from a fire that has been started by lightning. And she brings those into the cave and drops them on a pile of wood. And everybody around her freaks out because there's fire now in the cave. Oh my God, it's going to kill us. You know, all of the turmoil, because that's all they knew fire was. But this one person had an unconventional truth, like, maybe I can use that. Maybe we can take that and harness it and change our lives. And it took a while for the people to come around because they were scared of the fire. I think that's been what has happened throughout all of history. These ideas of someone breaking free from the status quo, saying, having the courage to step out and say, no, that's not the way it is. That doesn't have to be that way. We think back to Galileo. He spent the last 10 years of his life in a house of prison. He was imprisoned in his house by the Inquisition because he had the audacity to say that the world was not the center of the universe, that the earth was not the center of the universe. How dare he? They had to keep him isolated so he wouldn't tell anybody else this. That was a very unconventional truth to the inquisitors of the time from the Catholic religion that were stamping out anything that wasn't status quo, anything that didn't reflect what their belief system was. Martin Luther had to sneak out in the middle of the night to nail his treatise to the doors of the church to say there's something different than the Catholic Church. There's something different here. There's a different way of thinking. They sought him for a long time. He was in a lot of trouble for that. You know, we have modern day accounts of this. We have the amazing Rosa Parks. Challenge the status quo. I'm not going to stand while somebody else sits. I'm tired. I have the right to sit just as anybody else does on a bus. It was uncomfortable for everyone around her, that's for sure. They wanted her to get in line, conform, do what she was told. I think that's been the reaction to many of our world's greatest challenges and triumphs that we've experienced in our life. Changing that status quo, getting to a place where we don't have to believe what everybody else says is true, that we can discern the truth for ourselves, practice it, internalize it, and then live our lives from it. Unconventional truths, they're often met with controversy, resistance, rejection, sometimes downright anger. Some people who have spoken unconventional truths have been hunted for their lives. How dare they try to change the way things are? But that is the only thing that has ever changed our world, is to embrace something that others hadn't thought of before, to embrace it in a way that hadn't been thought of before. This is what leads us to living that life, that exceptional life, that life of freedom, of joy, of a sense of accomplishment, a sense of our place and our rightness in the world. When we can take an unconventional truth, internalize that, make that our truth, make that our way of being, then we have an opportunity to shift not only our lives, but the world around us. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it catalyzes the entire world around it. Sometimes the change is so radical that the world is never the same again. Ralph Waldo Emerson goes on to say in the American Scholar essay, freedom is achieved by a willingness to reject old concepts and to explore for oneself the accuracy of all claims. And so that's what I invite you to do. In fact, I challenge you to do that. As I stand up here and make claims, prove them or disprove them for yourself. This is me. This is my internalized belief system. This is me based on what I've read, what I've studied. Make it your truth. Make it your catalyst for change in your life. Because unconventional truths are the only thing that have ever changed the world. All right, let's take this into prayer. I invite our spiritual practitioners to stand and surround us, holding us in their consciousness. This beloved group of individuals spend a minimum of 4 years in study to become practitioners, to hold us in that love and light. And so I invite you to just gently close your eyes and take in a breath. Closing my eyes centers me. Taking in the breath connects me with spirit. And so right here and right now, I recognize that there is only this one presence, this one power, this one eternal love intelligence that has brought forth everything into existence. This one is the isness and the allness and the fullness of all life. It is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. I know that nothing exists outside of this one. And I know that all of creation is contained within it. And because I know this is true, I know that I am one in it. That the power and the presence of that mighty love intelligence is moving through me, showing up as me right here and right now. And as I know this is true for me, I know this is true for everyone. For again, all life is contained within the one. All life contains the attributes of the one. That peace, that love, that joy, that balance, that freedom to become who we're meant to be. And so knowing this truth, I speak my word. I know that right here and right now, each one of us is on a precipice of evolutionary change. I know that each one of us is a place of transformation within our own consciousness that moves out from us, touching all around us. I know that sometimes this takes a great act of courage. And sometimes it takes a small act of kindness. But whatever form it shows up in, I know that it is a transformational impulse of spirit wanting itself to be known in a greater and deeper way. And I surrender to that impulse and allow it to be the guiding force in my life. I give great thanks for this knowing. I give great thanks for the willingness to accept this responsibility. And I simply release this word into the law, into that creative mind that always says yes, knows no limits, no lack, no hesitation. Simply yes. I let it be, and I let it go. And so it is.